Here's the thing about mental health. It can make you feel like it is impossible to get help. The only person that can really pick you up off the ground and get you to where you need to be is you.
Hey, Ashley, thanks so much for joining us on You, Me, Honestly with One Mind. Can you please tell us a little bit about your mental health journey?
Yeah, boy. My mental health journey, I would say it probably hasn't been too severe. I'd say the biggest thing, like many people, I've had my bouts of anxiety and depression and dealing with those things. I think probably 80% of people have dealt with that at some point in their life. I don't know what the statistic would be. But also ADHD actually was a big thing for me, and I was diagnosed not until adulthood. It was suspected as a child. I never got tested, never got treated, never went to therapy for it. So that's something I had to learn to manage as an adult, and that's been probably depression and anxiety. I find for me that physical activity has been helpful for those things, but ADHD requires, if you're not on meds, which we can get into kind of later, but if you're not on meds or something for it, it's something that you do need to learn to make up some rules for yourself so that you're not making the same mistakes all the time and kind of getting behind on things and just having it take over your life.
So, how did you find out and get your diagnosis of ADHD?
I was in law school and trying to keep up with a law school workload without any kind of help, which, college was pretty easy for me to get through. I was smart enough to kind of get through a lot of the stuff and memorize things. I can memorize things pretty easily, but I wasn't being required to read such dense material and so much of it all at once, all the time, like law school kind of demanded. So by the time I got to law school, if I did not have any kind of intervention, I probably would have had a lot of trouble, especially my first year. Went to a psychiatrist, got diagnosed. I was medicated for years. And about five-ish years ago, I quit medication, and now I don't have medication in the traditional sense. Between that and just coming up with kind of solid, clear, rules and parameters for myself, write this down, make sure this goes in your calendar. Always just stop yourself. Whatever you're doing, it has to stop. You need to do it right away so you don't forget things, and, just kind of creating rules for myself to kind of go throughout my day. That way, less ADHD type of issues are coming up.
Yeah, structure and time management are so key with managing ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So, what advice would you give your younger self or someone struggling with a similar experiences with their mental health?
Here's the thing about mental health. It can make you feel like it is impossible to get help, or that you lack the, especially in like the case of like depression and things like that, you kind of lack the motivation to not only do the things you love, but to go get the help you need to get back to that life. But the unfortunate thing is, for most people, I don't think it's unfortunate, it's just a reality, is that, the only person that can really pick you up off the ground and get you to where you need to be is you. So, when it comes down to people who are struggling with mental health, one thing that I've always found helpful is I revert back to what I call square one, or homeostasis. When I feel like, for me, a major stressor that can affect my mental health is having too much going on all at once and not having a grip on it. That's when, I'm sure you found out in your life, that's when ADHD symptoms start to pop up and things are happening. You're like, oh my God, I double booked myself, or oh my God, I forgot to do something really important, or, you know, anything like that. Going back to a set of self-care regimen, whatever you make it to be. Some people, if they're really struggling and they're feeling depressed, it's time to take a step back from what they're doing, go take a bath, go do something relaxing that's just for you, just whatever it is that kind of brings you down to a level where there's not all that, kind of noise going on in your head, and you can just kind of take a moment to breathe, and then hopefully if you kind of stick with that and don't overexert yourself trying to, because look, if you're going through a mental health struggle, you're not going to be functioning like your normal self, and you have to accept that until you've kind of got things back under control. So I think that, coming up with a routine, if you will, or something that, you know what to do. This is the plan. Whenever this happens, whenever things get out of control, like this is my plan. And I just have to promise myself that I adhere to it no matter how hard it is. Cause going back to what I said, it's like the reality is that when you're an adult and you don't have people around you, sometimes you're the person that you need to depend on to, make things better for yourself. And, sometimes that has to come from within or from getting professional help, but you're the one at the end of the day. So, I think coming up with a set plan ahead of time, is a great way to, if you're going to go through it, you're going to go through it, but at least you can kind of get through it a little faster and, get the help you need or hit the little reset button you need to hit before things get really bad. You know yourself the best. So it's always best to do what works for you.
For sure. We actually had a very similar theme about self-empowerment, how it's up to us in our last conversation. And just to add on what you're saying when it comes to self-care, I think it's really important to have action lists, and meaning like a plan of action list. And there could be 3 different lists depending on your needs.
Yeah.
So am I stressed right now? If I'm stressed right now, maybe I need to practice some self-care. So that list could be self-care. And that could be, like you mentioned, taking a bath. Maybe it's going for a walk, getting in nature, connecting with a pet, socializing with a friend, writing down my gratitudes, journaling, intention setting, talking to my therapist, meditating, breath work, whatever it is. Write down a whole list, painting, karate class, whatever, put it on a list. I know what my go-to self-care things are. So when I'm stressed, I know where to turn and I don't have to brainstorm and think too hard. It's already all written down. Right. Or am I not stressed? Am I overwhelmed? And my overwhelmed might need help. Okay, I'm overwhelmed, help. Okay, so if I'm overwhelmed at work, who can I go to get support from? When we're overwhelmed, we need help. We need someone to intervene. So do we need to reach out to somebody to help cook our meals that day, or to help pick up our kid from school so we have an extra hour? Do we need to hire a babysitter? Do we need to take a mental health day off work? Like, what is it we need to do to offload and offset that overwhelm? Because stress and overwhelm are 2 different beasts. And usually overwhelm needs a bit more intervention and help from others. Right. And then there's the action list. If you deal with a mental health crisis, for example, like myself with bipolar, if I have a manic episode or psychosis, I need to know what are my action items, and I need to share that action item list with friends and family close to me so they can help me do those things if I'm dysfunctional. And that could be reach out to my psychiatrist, up my medication, take a few days off work, practice self-care and know what that list looks like, get my exercise, make sure I'm taking good care of my sleep and eating, and just focusing on my basic needs. And just knowing those lists. So when we're in those crisis modes, we know like, hey, I have a plan. I'm prepared for this. And we can proactively be taking care of ourselves along the way. So it's not just reactive care, right. But it's good to know what our reactive care looks like.
And you just actually reminded me of something. It's one of the things that is so easy for us to do is when we get overwhelmed, especially, is that we're like, oh, but I still have to do all these things. I have to go take care of my mom. I have to take care of my girlfriend, or, whoever it is, whatever it is. I have to do all this work stuff. You're not going to be showing up for those things fully for very long, if at all, if you kind of don't take that step back, or you're going to make it harder for yourself to get back to homeostasis, as I like to call it, your normal, average function. Basically, you're going to have a harder time if you don't listen to that little voice that's like, oof, I'm feeling it today. I'm really struggling. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed.
So true. And when I'm in that headspace of I'm overwhelmed, I can't manage right now, I ask myself the question, what absolutely needs to be done today, and what won't die if I don't give it attention today,
What are my
and like,
non-negotiables?
exactly. Like, what
Yeah.
do I have absolutely no choice? What's the bare minimum I could do to like get through today?
Yep.
And what can be left till tomorrow? Because I'm surprised so many times at how many times I ask myself, does this have to be done today? And it's like, actually, no, it needs to get done this week. It's not a today thing. Let it go. So just managing our time properly could be so effective for managing our mental health.
Yes.
What are you most proud of in your mental health journey, and how did you accomplish it?
Staying in therapy has been a good one for me. I don't need to see my therapist all too often. I keep it like, every few weeks to a month, somewhat regular. But, there was a time when that was every week, sometimes twice a week, because things were rough in my life at that time. And I really needed that support. So knowing when it's time to reach out for support and asking for the support that you need, and, you will get it. You've got to ask for it, though. You've got to seek it out sometimes. I've kept a routine, even when I don't. There have been times where I'm like, do I have much to talk to my therapist about today? But I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's me checking in with somebody every 3 weeks. It's me checking in. Somebody's checking in on me to make sure I'm okay. That's probably been the thing that I've committed myself to, that that I think is kind of it should be a non-negotiable for most people anyhow. Just having a neutral third party to talk to, and have somebody that's not invested in your life other than in a professional manner, just check in on you to make sure that you are okay. Like their interest is to make sure that you're okay, and that's it. So I think that's probably the thing I'm happy that I'm proud of myself that I committed to that and didn't really let it fall by the wayside, because it probably kept me out of some, much more difficult situations than I've ever found myself in.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm a big advocate for therapy. It's so important. And consistency is key, because recovery doesn't happen overnight. It's nonlinear, and to keep showing up even when you don't know what to talk about, there is some new layer that eventually does get exposed, and we find new things to reflect on as we just begin the conversation. How does your relationship to sexual orientation affect your mental health?
I'm not sure that I can say that my sexual orientation affects my mental health. I am trans, but that's the only thing that has been like a major factor in my mental health. And that's obviously something I've had to spend a lot of time unpacking and, working on, and figuring out how I want to navigate the world, and how I want to navigate life in a different gender than the one I was born, you know? Um, so that's been a big thing for me. I wish I could say more about it. After you do a certain amount of work on it, hopefully it just becomes something that is part of your life, and it's not everything that you need to be focused on. Because I think that can drag people down, is if that is just something that's always on their mind. It's I'm fortunate at this place where I'm at in my life and my transition. Like I go several days sometimes without really having to think about it too much. I don't, I'm fortunate that that's the case, and that, it's taken a lot of work to get to that point where I don't really feel weighed down by feelings of dysphoria, I guess is what you could say, so much. I mean, of course it exists. It's never not going to be there to some degree, but it's something that if you do work on and do learn to have a different perspective about things, instead of feeling like, oh, I'm never going to be this, I'm never going to be that, I'm never going to look like this, I'm never going to look like that, whatever it is. Or, if somebody's thinking about sexual orientation stuff, I'm never going to be good enough for my parents because of this, or, you need to learn some of that's external. Some external things may always exist, and you can't really control that, but you can control the way that you have perspective about it.
Out of curiosity, has transitioning impacted your self-esteem? And have you noticed a difference in the way people treat you as a man compared to when you presented as a female?
we could do a whole seminar on this.
Just throwing in a question that I'm just curious.
I mean, certainly from a societal standpoint, yes, I think that you are treated differently in many ways. I mean, I don't remember before transition somebody being like, and pronoun has nothing to do with it, but as soon as you walk into a place, how can I help you, sir? Instead of, a woman they might let wander around the store for 5 more minutes or so. It's really weird. There are some really sexist things that you kind of become more abundantly aware of kind of after that point. A lot of things like out there in the world you see just from living life on the other side, so to speak. I think it's affected my self-esteem positively. There's never not going to be dysphoria, but I think that transition has done wonders in the world of making me feel more like myself. So therefore, and also making, I work at it. It's taking hormones alone doesn't make you strong, or, it doesn't really do a whole lot to make you look a whole lot different. You have to really work at it and, work out or whatever, have some physical fitness, but making me feel like I fit in my world a little better certainly has had a tremendous positive effect on me.
I'm so glad to hear that. And for people who don't know what dysphoria means, can you define that word?
Gender dysphoria is really a discomfort with one's own appearance or how they are perceived by others, how they feel they appear and how they feel, and then how others may perceive you as well. All of those things can kind of cause people who have gender dysphoria to just have a lot of anxiety, a lot of discomfort. It's a very hard feeling to describe. The only people in my life that aren't, I don't have a lot of trans friends actually, but the only people in my life who aren't experiencing that, who I've found can understand it, are actually people who have had eating disorders, because they understand looking in the mirror and not really seeing or feeling what they should, I've had some people like that are like, I kind of understand, I think, like what this feeling is. I feel it in a very different sense, but I understand the base level of it.
Sounds like body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria have a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I think so.
What advice would you give to someone in transition?
Oh, 3 things. One, we already kind of discussed it a little. I think that committing to going to therapy should be non-negotiable. I mean, for many people, like to get on hormones and stuff, you have to go see a therapist or something like that anyways. But, a lot of people sometimes, like, once they've got that letter and they're good to go start HRT, sometimes people stop going to therapy in that point. That's the time when you need to be going to therapy all the time, because, I think there's this idea out there that suddenly you're going to take hormones and you're just going to turn into that man you always wanted to be, or that woman you always wanted to be. And that's not really how it works. It's a long process. It takes time. There's going to be times where, there's going to be a very awkward puberty phase that is not fun to live through, no matter how you look at it. It's not a fun time to be in transition, but it's like that hump you have to kind of get over to get to the other side, and things tend to get a little smoother for a lot of people. But I think number one, stay in therapy, seek help, not just from like a group session. I think individual therapy is very important. 2, I think that with social media, it's been it's been 2 things. It's been a great resource for people who are trans or questioning or whatever, to kind of like get information from other people who have lived that experience and, understand a little bit about what it might be like and things like that. But for the people who are just beginning the process, or for the people who are kind of making that kind of content on social media, I think it's very important for people in general to not just be hinged to one part of their identity. When you make this part of you, I mean, look, if you're trans, it is what it is, but it's a part of your life. But it doesn't have to be everything that you are and everything that you do. And I think that some people kind of feel, I don't know if they put pressure on themselves, or if they feel like other people are looking to them for that. I don't know if mentorship is the right word, but for that kind of advice, that you're not obligated to do that. And look, I am what I am, but my transness is like this much of my identity total. There are a million other things that I am and I can be. And so I think it's important to diversify yourself and not be constantly in that, because I think there's a fine line between, like I said, using it as a resource and also ruminating in the feelings of dysphoria in a not so positive way. So I think there's kind of a balance there that people need to consider when it comes to social media and things like that with that topic. And the third thing is that, building off what I just said, even though there is that very supportive community that can be there for you, there are going to be some people out there in the world that are straight up hateful or kind of ignorant. And that's while I would like that to just kind of not be the case anymore. And I do think it will progressively, as years go on, get better. But it is a reality that some people out there are not kind, and they don't care that you're trans. They don't care what your pronouns are. They'll gladly flip you off instead of call you by your proper pronouns, whatever it is. And, that's something that, while you don't need to stick around and tolerate it, it's something that you might encounter out there. And, you do have to develop a little bit of a thick skin and be okay with who you are, no matter what some rando on the internet says about you, or, what some, hopefully not a family member or somebody close to you, but, there are people out there, whether or not they're related close to you, that, could be not so receptive. And you've just got to kind of learn to let those things go and not let them drag you down, because, every soul is on its own journey, if you will. And, those people have some things to figure out about themselves if it's so upsetting to them. And you just got to not let it affect you so much, no matter what kind of comes. So I've been very lucky with the people in my life that's not very much been the case, but, I've been in the internet too. I see what kind of terrible and very misguided things that, people think or say about people in the LGBT community in general. So
thanks for sharing all of that. Very valuable. Are there any specific mental health resources that you would recommend to someone in transition?
I'm local to LA. The LGBT Center obviously provides, top-notch services, as far as healthcare, hormone replacement, and not just that, but mental health services. There's group therapy they offer, and they're not the only organization in this area that do that sort of thing, but they're probably the premier organization in this area that offer that sort of thing. If you're seeking mental health, usually the protocol is, if you're insured, your insurance can kind of spit you a list of people who kind of deal with that sort of issue, and you can kind of choose from there, or you can go out of pocket. It depends what your situation is. If you're really kind of in a tough financial spot, I'd recommend going to like an LGBT center or someplace like that, because they can usually take people on like a sliding scale, or if you have Medi-Cal or some kind of equivalent, it could be good too.
Can you please share with us a bit about your addiction recovery story and journey to sobriety?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I discovered, which should not have been a surprise to me, because I've got some addiction that runs in the family, that I should never have been allowed to take Adderall. It was a terrible idea. Not a terrible idea. It was effective, but it was also a problem for me. I had a problem with it. So I kind of got to a point about, it was like 5.5 years ago or so, where I decided that had to go. Adderall had to go for me. And at the same time, I kind of slowly decided that alcohol was no longer for me either. And I'm not sober in the traditional sense. I'm what some people would call California sober. I don't drink alcohol. I don't do any hard drugs. The only substances I use are marijuana and psychedelics. So I kind of went through a whole evolution on that. But I, I mean, I quit Adderall and alcohol pretty much cold turkey, um, like 5, 6 years ago. And I've been fortunate that it's hasn't been a problem since, um, in that, um, I've just been mindful, stayed in therapy, talked to my therapist about it, um, avoided situation. I just stopped seeing the PCP that was prescribing me because I knew if I walked in the office, they would offer it and say, "Oh, you need a refill." And I'm like, would me in recovery say no to that refill and tell them, "Oh, I really don't want you to give me that. Thank you." So, I did what I had to do to just get myself out of the situation at the time when things were really tough for me. And now you just, I have no desire, but that was a process. And recovery is very difficult. I'm from Massachusetts. I don't know how much you know about Massachusetts, but the opiate crisis there is really terrifying. I've lost some family members to opiate overdoses. And you know hard drugs are not something I recommend people dabble with too much. It's really it can be risky. And with what we've got going on now, with it's just a lot harder to figure out where things come from now. And going to the rave and popping a pill is not something that is a thing you can just take lightly anymore, because Lord only knows what's in that.
It seems like your addiction challenges were mostly with alcohol. So, basing on that, how has living sober from alcohol impacted your mental well being?
Alcohol for me was very, very dark. um, Not that I became a very dark person on it. I was usually jovial and everything was fine. But the thing about alcohol that was the biggest problem is that no matter who you are, your decision making can go out the window very quickly on alcohol, because it does inhibit your decision making skills. I really do find that it's been interesting adjusting to having no alcohol. I network a lot, and everybody's like, we always go to these mixers, and I sit there and I have like 4 club sodas. And everybody else is drinking, and they're like, "What are you drinking?" I'm like, "It's club soda." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you don't drink." It's like, it's very ingrained in our culture. That's the drug that is the most available. It's very legal. It's at every restaurant. It's at every bar. It's at every barbecue. So if alcohol is something you're struggling with, removing yourself from the circumstances isn't really possible. So alcohol is going to be around you. You don't have to invite it into your home, but when you go out and about, it's bound to be around you. And you've got to learn what you have to do to kind of make it to that next day of sobriety, right? You've got to learn to make it to that next day of sobriety somehow. And, everybody has to kind of feel out how they go about that on their own terms. But, it's the most widely available drug. So, it's an important one for people to just be really mindful with that addiction of what you're doing, and make good choices.
That's all really important. Thanks for sharing that. I'm just going to throw in one last question, which is, if you had one piece of advice and tip for somebody going through becoming sober, what would you tell them?
The thing about addicts is that you don't go from addicted to not addicted. You can go from not sober to sober, but that addiction, that part of your mind never really goes away. And what I often see people do is go from one addiction to another. It may not be another drug or alcohol, but it might be, I'm addicted to arts and crafts. And they'll max out their credit cards on arts and crafts, or they'll way overdo it working out. I think you've just really got to find balance in whatever you choose to do that isn't that activity, the drinking, doing drugs, whatever. you've got to find something healthy and stay healthy about it. You've got to learn to have a healthy mind about everything that you do, and not, it's very easy to throw yourself into something new that is also exciting to you and treat that as your new addiction. I think that's probably the thing that, and also seek out support, I think, is the other thing too.
Yes, support groups, AA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, whatever it is you're going through, there are tons of support groups.
You can't talk about your addiction with your friends who are equally addicted to whatever you were on to begin with. So, you've got to find external sources for that.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ashley.